Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. What's hot on the table this week?
Now, the hashtag boycott Bumble has been trending on TikTok recently with over 1 million views. Lauren Smith Fields, a 23-year-old Black college student, was found dead in her Connecticut apartment this past December after going on a Bumble date with an older white man. The man in question was not investigated by the police because he seemed like a nice guy. Many women since then have come started to come forward about their experiences with sexual assault and harassment from other Bumble users, calling out the hypocrisy of Bumble being an app that claims to put women first and encouraging gender equality. Yet women have reported being banned from Bumble after reporting their abusers. Bumble and its CEO, Whitney Wolfe Herd, has yet to make a statement about the death of Smith Fields or even offer public condolences for the events that took place because of the app. So I wanted to ask, should dating apps like Bumble be held accountable for sexual misconduct by its users?
That is such an interesting question. I think that it's there's levels to it. I think
Mhm.
that while Bumble itself is not responsible for what people do, I do think that social media and dating apps have a responsibility to their users to create a safe space. And so I think that when it comes to that kind of situation specifically, it's horrendous that this woman was killed and the police decided, oh, he was a nice guy. And I want to say this right here, and we're not going to get into it because that's a whole nother episode. But it's really funny how nice guy syndrome usually only works for white people and white men.
Mm.
I wonder why. I wonder why the police don't think that. I wonder why the police didn't think that George Floyd was a nice guy. I wonder
Mm.
why they didn't think that Trayvon Martin was probably a nice kid. You know, it's mighty funny how white men and women are get the nice guy, nice girl syndrome. It's interesting that police see them in that way, but that's a conversation for another day. Let me get back
Right.
to
We know the
the
police are
question at hand.
trash.
Let me get back to the question. But yeah, I do think that social media spaces like this, and like dating apps, they do have a responsibility to create a safe space for their users. And I think that we have let them go on for far too long not doing that. Because I don't know if you know this too, but a lot of dating apps, if you've used them, Bumbles, Tinders, all the apps or whatever, Grinders, everything, they don't have an ID check. There's no way to verify that someone is who they say they are. There's no way to verify that this person is 18 or older. So there are several 16, 15, probably even 13, 12, younger than that on these apps. And there's no way to ensure that. Now, again, of course, we know that people can make fake IDs and such, but there is no extra level. It's almost as if they're like, what happens, happens. And oops, kind of like it's giving very much so like, oh, we just created the space. If people murder people, that's fine. If people do this, that's whatever. No, no, because with the amount of users that you have on this app, with the amount of people that engage to use these platforms, we have to get out of the fact that let's just really we need to get into the fact that we are in a technological society now. We need to get into
Right.
the fact we need to get into that. We need to get into the fact that we are in the tech age now, where we're not really meeting people in person anymore. We're not really meeting people or going out for coffee at a public places anymore. We're not doing that anymore. We can summon strangers to our house to drive us places. So we have to get out of the idea that oh, they don't really have, because a lot of people make the discussion like, well, not everybody has Bumble, not everybody has Tinder, so they don't have to do X, Y, and Z, and not everybody has Instagram, not everybody has blah blah, whatever. And it's like we need to get out of the fact, because that's what they want. They want
Right.
us to keep having the conversation that they're not responsible, because they don't want us to realize the true fact of is that there is more people than not are online, especially
Exactly.
in 2022. Now, maybe in 1998, 2000s or whatever, it might have been a little bit more difficult. But we're in 2022 now. These spaces, Facebooks, Instagrams, Twitters, all these spaces, even Instagram, that even YouTube, I believe, has a algorithm now that when you make videos, you have to specify whether or not your video is made for kids or made for adults, so that kids don't get recommended videos that have adult content in them. Now, again, of course, people can always lie and say no or whatever, and so forth. But it's a level of step. It's a level of accountability that this app is taking that a lot of apps like Instagram don't, because I have yet to see Instagram make a space to ensure that people under the age of 15 or under the age of 18 are only able to access content that is for their age range.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that so often we just have people assume that the internet should just stay this lawless wasteland, quote unquote, this
Exactly.
wild west. And it's
Not the
like
Wild West.
the wild, wild west. But I think that it's so important that there are these measures of accountability because we hold physical locations to some sort
Mm,
of standard of accountability. Like if you go into a bar and you are not 21 and you get served a drink and you're like sloppy drunk and something happens to you, that bar can lose their liquor license. That bar can be
exactly.
shut down. If a club gets all of these allegations of rapes happening in the club and club workers just being like, oh, we don't care, that media is going to be covering that. People are not going to go to that club anymore, and
Liable to get shut down.
there could be reparations because of that. So just like you would hold a physical space accountable, we need to hold these apps accountable for creating something for safety, whether it's being that ID check, whether that's really talking about creating transparency about how these algorithms work, being like, hey, we see your preferences and we have at least some sort of vetting process. We check like sex offender registries to make sure
Hmm.
there aren't sex offenders on our app. Having something where you have that level of accountability, because if we're being real, if problematic users are on your app, maybe you make it too easy for them to be on there and do these things, especially with repeat offenders that get reported and then you just don't do anything. Or matter, you do something, you ban the person who reported them. What sense does that make?
I think that even going a little bit further with it, it's like I think that when it comes to these specific dating apps, a lot of them use your data, as in knowing where your location is, where you're going, how your movements, tracking what you swipe on, when you swipe on it. They read your chats, obviously. We know that that's a fact. There's nothing to be secretive about that there. And so when you make a plan with someone on the dating app, and it's like, I'm going to meet you at X, Y, and Z place, I think that there should be some way to track those movements to ensure that someone is getting to X, Y, and Z place safety, even if it's a suggestion within the app that you don't have to take, but the suggestion that says, all right, you're meeting X, Y, and Z on this day. We can send your location to 3 different of your emergency contacts as you're going. And if you don't check in at a certain time, we will notify them that you have not checked in your last known location. Building a profile of that person to ensure that, okay, you left this location at this time and this person didn't leave. So we're going to go send someone out for them if they aren't checking in on their app or something that shows that these apps care about your well-being and your personage and your personhood, showing that little extra step. And then, honestly, I don't think it's that difficult because you already have the information. You
Mhm.
already have
It's there.
it's there. It's obviously there. And so to me, it's like I just don't understand how these apps that are so ingrained in our society, so ingrained in our culture, Tinders, the Bumbles, the Instagrams, the fact that, like I said before, in 2022, it's almost impossible to meet someone in person first. Almost impossible. It's very unlikely to start relationships from meeting someone unless you're in school or in college or maybe at your job possibly, but for the most part, People meet each other online. They slide into the
Especially
DMs,
during a pandemic.
especially during a pandemic. And it's just crazy to me that there are not these there are not these things in place that says, okay, you were supposed to check in at this place, calling even if it's sending it to your emergency contact to say, hey, did X, Y, and Z check in with you because they were on a date with this person, sending a picture of the person they were on a date with to their emergency contact to say, hey, they were last seen with this person at this location. Have you checked in on them? Something. But because they don't, and like we just talked about, is that these apps rely on that conversation of not everybody has it. Not everybody's using it. So we shouldn't have to do all those things. You should be an adult. And once again, just like YouTube, just like all these other things, just like YouTube got onto the border with it, just like even cable companies where you have to put in like a code to access certain channels because they want a parental controls or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those tools should be accessible to everyone in these kinds of apps. And I think that we are, like you said, the bars have policies. They have policies in place to make sure that they try to keep their patrons safe. Restaurants have to be checked to be safe. And I think that there is no regulations for these apps. And that's the problem, is that there is no regulations. There is no, you can have this person can match when they match with these people and they make a plan to go X, Y, and Z, that you have to make sure that that person is okay. There are no regulations. These apps are not regulated by anybody but the app users and the people that pay them to put the ads on there. So right. The fact that there are no institutionalized law, just like we talked about before, about putting an anti-lynching bill on the record and on the dock, it's like the same thing with this. Put it into law that if a digital service is connecting people, that there are things in place to make sure that those people and their users are safe.
Right. And even beyond just like accountability, like we can get all into that. But bare minimum, Bumble should have just said something. They should have been like, we are extremely apologetic about this. We, are so sorry about this death happening. But like, they didn't. They didn't send a public apology. They didn't, send out a public statement being like, hey, this happened and we're going to put action to it to make sure our users are safe. They're just like, oh, we're not going to do anything. And it's really curious because this happened to a Black woman. And it's just begs this question. Why does it seem like Black women always get the short end of the stick when it comes to justice in these disappearance or dating violence cases?
It's disgustingly racist. This is the best way to say it. White supremacy. Because we also know that there was a case a while back. I don't even remember this, Daquon, about Gabby Petito, who went missing last year.
It was everywhere.
Everywhere. On Twitter, Instagram, I mean, just everywhere, trying to find the man that did it. But when a Black man or Black woman, specifically a Black woman too, because they're the least protected class in America, next to Black trans women, it's the facts that Black women in general are just not taken care of or protected because their lives are seen as not as valuable as this white woman or this white man even. And it's crazy to me that in this case, especially, like the fact that I didn't even know about this until you brought it to the table to talk about. I didn't even know about this. That's what really hurt, like breaks my heart, is that something as horrendous as this to happen on a platform as big as Bumble, the fact that it was nowhere to be seen, at least not in my channels and in my networks, but that Gabby Petito thing was everywhere.
Every news station, every social media platform,
TikTok, Instagram, trending everywhere. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating that stuff like this, like Black lives are not even given the respect of being spoken about. That's how much we don't matter to the grander society. is that we're not even given the luxury of being spoken about in bigger spaces and given the attention that we need to be able to hold these places accountable. But white women and white men, let this have been a white woman, and I would have known about it before you, Daquon. Let
Right.
this have been a white woman, Instagram, Twitter. My mama, who doesn't even use stuff, would have probably known about it before we did.
Right.
If
Let's
it was a
pull
white
from
woman.
racist white people's favorite thing. If the roles were reversed and it was this white woman with a black man, the black man would not have even gotten to the jailhouse.
Child, he'd have been dead the moment they found out it was a black man. Let's
Boom,
be real on
gone.
that.
Let's be honest. And it's absolutely disgusting because, like you said, this is just a product of racism in our country. We don't value black women in their lives. But, white people, white women, and white men, we value their lives a lot more. As seen by this white man being deemed a nice guy and just being able to walk
Walk
away
away.
scot free. So it's incredibly frustrating that something like this unfortunately happens to black women so often and we never know about it. Smithfields is only one case in, thousands, if not more, of black women and even indigenous women with the missing and murdered indigenous women movement happening. Like so often black and BIPOC women go missing. They disappear.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, we didn't care about their lives anyway. So why should we expend any effort to figure out what happened to them? If they turn up dead, well, we didn't care anyway.
Mm.